welcome back in the studio. I hope you had a nice day so far and are ready for our talk today with a very special guest. And before we start, I would like to invite you again to participate in this talk. You can ask questions. So use that chance. You can do it over Event Mobi. Just click on participate and join us here in the studio. We are waiting for your questions. And the book of the day, snack of the day, we already said it, Donut Economics. And with me in the studio here is Daniel Lang. You know him already. Hello, Daniel.
Hi, good to see you.
Nice to have you here. And you have a very special guest. But first of all, I would like to know, why did you choose this book? And I would like to offer you, for answering, the snack of the day, in case you want to show something.
Well, yes, because I think with this book, the snack really is a perfect fit. And one thing I really like with this book is that I think we often think in pictures, and we need simple narratives if we want to really change something. And what Kate Raworth did with this donut metaphor is to just say, well, there is clearly something like planetary boundaries. So this is the outer boundary. And this was a very prominent article that was published in Science by Mr. Rockström and others, where they made very clear, well, if we want to operate in a safe planetary space as humanity, then we can't go beyond certain limits if we emit certain greenhouse gases or with regards to the distinction of species, etc., etc., etc. So, and what Kate Raworth did, and I really like this, and therefore the donut is a perfect example, is that she said, yes, that's true, but we also need a social ceiling. We need a social foundation. So there is a minimum of social justice, for instance. Everybody should have health. And then she said, well, why don't we say this is a donut, and this is exactly the safe and just space for humanity to operate in the future? And this is the entire idea of the donut economics. And what she then did, and this is the second thing what I liked, is that she really said, well, we need a different way of doing economics, of thinking economics, and clearly shows 7 ways of rethinking economics for the 21st century. Like, well, going away from GDP growth, we have discussed about growth yesterday, and really saying, well, it's more important to operate in this safe space, etc., etc., etc. So very tangible, strong picture in the beginning, and I think really a way forward.
And I think it's also interesting what she says in the book to really get rid of the words we already know and just don't hesitate to create new ideas, new words for those new concepts that she's presenting here. So what would you say, how can we grow while thinking green?
Well, I think Kate Raworth would take it differently. She would say, why should we grow? Okay, she would rather say, how can we be happy, and how can we make sure that everybody lives in a just world while not going beyond the planetary boundaries? Yeah. So I think this is a rethinking, and it's interesting. You might have heard that even cities are now redesigning their economies after Corona in the direction of the donut economy. For instance, Amsterdam is currently really trying to rethink its entire economic system in a donut logic.
So a practice example here. So next time we all go to Amsterdam for a short trip. So who's our guest today in the studio?
It's Claudia Kemfert.
Oh, the donut economy just fell down.
Oh no, oh no.
Claudia Kemfert, wonderful. So I would say without any hesitation, enjoy the talk. And for the students, do not forget to participate. Enjoy.
So that's perfect. I'm extremely happy that we have Claudia Kemfert here today. Also starting from the book, because Handelsblatt just confirmed recently that she is the most influential woman economist we have in Germany. So it's great to have an economist in the room who is super influential and who does a lot of work exactly rethinking our economic system in a way that we can live in this safe and just operating space. She's an economist by training. She is since 2004 already heading in the German Institute for Economics. She's heading the Department for Energy, Environment, and also there putting major thoughts into the political world as well. She's consulting political leaders on a national level, on an international level, European level, and has received for these consulting activities also several prizes already, several awards. And what I particularly like as well is that she's not only advising politicians on the national, international level, but she's also kind of, I don't think she's consulting, and this will be an interesting point to discuss, but she's marching together with Fridays for Future and taking then the ideas of Fridays for Future even a step forward. And I look very much forward to also talk a bit about Mondays for Future, not only Fridays for Future, but also Mondays for Future, where she really explores very concrete actions to really make a sustainable transformation possible. So Claudia Kemfert, I look very much forward for the next 50 minutes. Welcome here to the studio.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. Hello, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm really impressed about the studio, and it looks really like a movie studio. So really great what you're doing. And thanks also for showing the book. I completely agree on donut economics because Kate Raworth, as you already said, is really important, and she did an important work related to economics because she really broadened the perspective. And that's so important that we come away from the pure economic thinking of markets and growth and GDP growth, but just to focus also on planetary boundaries. And I also like very much this donut style because it very much shows that we have these boundaries, that we are within a part of it as a society, as the economy, and the economy is exactly doing what the society wants to do, and really change also and broaden the picture here, that we have to extend it and also include environment and sustainability, and also include the aspect of climate change into it, and act within this boundaries as a society all together. Be happy, you already said that, but also bring all the tides together so that we can really work and do in the economy everything we need to do and have to do, but also not harm the environment and not harm the climate, but just to be in line with it. So I really like it that you have chosen this as an introductory book. I really can also recommend it, and also the small films. She has really made small movies on her website. I can really recommend because also she shows that together with her students, she put together figures and making little stories out of it. So it's really nice, and I very much like her. And that's good that cities like Amsterdam are already applying the idea and finding ways of how can we really manage to act within these boundaries and also within an economy which is sustainable and not harming climate and the overall system. So thanks a lot for having me. I'm new at Leuphana University since a year, as you already mentioned. My background is economics. I studied economics at Bielefeld University and Oldenburg University with the focus on environmental economics and climate economics very early on, and have already the research I'm doing now basically also in Berlin is also focusing as all the time on energy transition, on the transformation of the whole energy system towards more sustainability, increase the share of renewables. What does this mean for jobs? What does it mean also for the overall economy? Nuclear phase out, coal phase out, and all the rest, but also on transportation. So transforming also the transportation system, the city structure, as you mentioned, also more cycling, more pedestrian lines, less cars, but more railway system, the public transportation important. So this is also one part of what we are doing in our research. But in addition to that, of course, also the impacts of climate change and climate policy also from the economic perspective. And this is what not only me personally, but my team, which is really a great team, which I have at the DIW, we are doing together with different kind of methodologies and models and empirical assessments. But also, as you already said, I'm part of and actually right now co-chair of the advisory group to the German government on the environment, Sachverständigenrat für Umweltfragen, SRU, where we also do research and write reports and recommendations for the German government. And what I did under my supervision was one report on the transportation change that we need, the transformation of the transportation system, and most recently a special report on hydrogen, especially green hydrogen, where we see also environmental or have environmental concerns related to hydrogen. When we produce hydrogen, we should not contradict the goals that we have related to the environment, related to the climate, and the emissions need to go down as steep as possible. So we really need more renewable energy and an efficient way of using renewable energy and transform the whole system where hydrogen plays a role, but only a minor role for the industry especially, but there are of course always lobbying influences which want to show, well, we need a lot of hydrogen coming also from the natural gas side, which is currently also under debate whether this is really sustainable or not. So if we are really looking at emissions and sustainability goals, we need to do much more than just replace, for example, cars or just use hydrogen instead of oil. That's too short notice. So that we really need, or too tight in our view. So we really need to broaden the picture and have several boundaries, planetary boundary goals, also in mind if we are looking at the individual transformation strategies of energy and transportation. So this is actually what we are doing right now. We have an energy crisis in Europe. We are talking about this all day long with very high fossil fuel prices like oil, coal and gas. That's quite severe and also new that this happened. So we really need to act much faster as we did in the past and do everything we can do in order to increase the share of renewable energy and also to save energy in the broader sense. And this is also at Leuphana. We did a seminar last year and this year as well with Thomas Chimeros on sustainable energy, where we looked on from the economic side on all these aspects, but also from the legal or the legal point of view Thomas Chimeros is coming from. And that's really fun because we really can combine different issues here and different views on the topic. On the one hand, economics, on the other hand, the legal view on it. That's one thing. And also another seminar which is starting also here at Leuphana is with Michael Braungart on climate positive. So we are looking at technologies which can make it happen that not only climate neutral is important, but also how we can also make the whole system climate positive. He has also from his credit to credit approach interesting ideas of how to implement that. And I was also part of the sustainable chemistry lecture last year and have now really nice students on bachelor, master level. So I really enjoyed it. And it was really fun to do all this because the subject is so important and the interest is also very important. So that was a brief right through my point of view of these subjects. And really thanks again for having me, and thanks also for the invitation. I think it's good to talk about all this also in this kind of framework.
Thank you so much. And you already gave me and hopefully also the students so many places where we could start a discussion. And let me start with a report that you have recently, or that you as a co-chair have recently published together with your colleagues. No, it's not a report. It was an impulse paper in December 2020, before the entire election. And this impulse paper has the title "Sustainability as a Task of Historic Dimension." And in this impulse paper, you also make very clear that the next legislative period, that means the next 4 years, are kind of decisive to setting the gears towards really making the fundamental, or already installing the regulations that are needed to really address these fundamental challenges. And maybe you can briefly explore, on the one hand side, why you or the council really thinks that this is really such a task of historic dimension, and B, why there is this urgency. You know, I think the next legislative period, we have now, or we had discussions revolving around sustainability, I think at least over the last 60, 70 years, starting with limits to growth, etc. And now we only have 4 years left. So why is it this historic dimension, or what is the historic dimension, and why the urgency?
Yeah, thanks for this question. It's really important to look at the urgency. As you already mentioned, I mean, we know all about this climate change and climate protection since so many years, so many decades already. And Klaus Hasselmann, actually a good friend of mine, recently won the Nobel Prize. We worked with him also on subjects on climate protection, and a very early paper in Science have we together with other colleagues here, and showing about there is a long history of scientific facts that we have to react and reduce emissions globally as fast as we can. And it did not happen. And Klaus was very nice also in the interviews I saw in saying, well, we said it all the time. I said it all the time. And many climatologists agree and said, we said it all the time, but it did not happen enough. It happened. I mean, what happened, and this is also what I write in my new book, is to give a brief history of showing why we had climate protection conferences all over the globe since over 20 years, and we have made also decisions to reduce emissions. But what we see on the empirical level is that the emissions globally do not go down, they go up. And that's the wrong direction. So this is happening because of the economic system, because of economic growth, because of this, that we are not able really to put the right policy instruments into place in order really to make the right incentives to reduce emissions, but and also not incentivizing it enough to increase the share of renewables, to decrease the share of coal, oil, and gas, but just to continue as long as we can. And here a lot of myths come also into place. Has been also happening a lot of PR campaigns, which we can read also scientific studies about it, like Exxon and all the other oil companies really spread doubts, merchants of doubts, and these doubts were already, I mean, were only there because they wanted to spread doubts in order to extend the lifetime of fossil fuel as much as they can. And this happened actually the last decades, and we have to deal with it. Also, confrontations, like climatologists were aggressive, there was some aggressivity against them, that they are really, I mean, the merchants of doubts means also we have our own scientists and climatologists. Climatologist does not know what they are talking about. So all this happened all the time. And this is now at the point in time where we cannot continue as we did in the past. And this is why the urgency comes into place, that we have to act much faster and have to do a U-turn. I mean, the emissions need to go down. The climatologists really warning, not only several decades, but now even emotionally, and saying, well, we have to stop it. Otherwise, our planet is on danger. It's not the planet, it's us. So we really have to act as soon as possible. And We have the Paris Agreement decided on emission decline already 6 years ago. Now we have the Green Deal, we have the Fit for 55 program, we have Germany, we have other countries. They do want to act, but not fast enough. So we stick still on coal. We have a lot of oil. We burn still oil. The transportation system is still relying on oil. The building sector is not saving enough energy, and all the rest. I mean, the increased share of renewables, it's not coming fast enough. And this is why the time is running out. And I know many people say, well, you tell us since many decades the time is running out. It's always running out now. It's really running out. And this is why we are not 5 to 12, we are 5 past 12, and it's becoming severe and really worse. And what we see right now is already ongoing climate change with extreme weather events happening all over the globe, forest burning and droughts, and also heavy rainfalls in Germany, for example, with all the flooding, and really bringing huge economic damages. And this is happening, and the people feel also, okay, that's not the same as we had the last decades, and we experienced the last decade. So we really have to change now, and that's not fast enough. And this is why the urgency is so important. And this one, as you asked for the paper, we wanted to make clear here as a scientific advisory group. We need urgent action right now. And what we decide right now is so important because it drives not only 4 years, it drives 10 to 15 years. What we know from the last financial crisis, where we decided to spend money also to pay for new cars. I mean, just to promote the economy, understandable, but we shouldn't, if we spend stimulus packages and spend money into the economy, let's do it only for green technology, like electric mobility, like green hydrogen, whatever. I mean, there's so much need for modernization of the railway system, of schooling, of digitalization. There's so much need, and do not spend it for past fossil technologies, spend it for future technology, spend it for the future system and the system change as well. And this is why it's so important. And this is why we wanted to say, okay, you have now the chance, we have the chance, there's a new government now discussing about several issues. We know that they will not come up with this perfect solution, but at least there are two new parties on the table right now. And they have the chance, because a lot of young people voted them, both the Liberals and the Greens, to really make something new. And new means also modernize the political system, modernize the economy. And if you decide, please decide for the future, please decide for the future generations, because we cannot really afford it just to have a backward looking policy all the time. We need to change, and this is why the urgency. I mean, we can say 4 years, but it's really important to act now.
That's a very nice transition to my next question, because just this month another paper has been published by the Council, which has the title "What to Do Now," and you already said now we have the negotiations about the parties. If you would say, well, these are the two things that should be implemented by the next chancellor, by the parties. What would you like to see in the coalition contract, and then really implemented by the next within the next 4 years?
Yeah, I have 2 points. I would say the first and foremost, and really the important one, is that we speed up the increased share of renewable energy. We need to speed up as much as we can. The larger the increase of renewables, the less coal we can phase out, or the less coal is needed, the less oil is needed. So everything depends really on this transformation. Increase the share of renewable energy as fast as you can. Please put that into a coalition agreement, because that's really a most important thing. And if we do that, we do not have to negotiate about years, about coal phase out and so on. Just increase the share of renewables. That's the first thing I would really recommend to do. And the second one is related to transportation, because we need an urgent transition here as well. And it seems that it will be postponed even longer. But what we really need is a transformation of the transportation system towards more better railway system, towards more public transportation, more electric mobility in the broadest sense, less cars, but more human mobility as a service with digitalization. And I would really be happy if the second point would be also in there, in saying, well, we take it seriously and put the right signals and provide money also for the modernization of the railway system, of the transportation system in general. I would say these are the 2 points I would like to see. There are many others, like spending in insulation of buildings. The industry need to be transformed. They also need to be modernized. So there are so many things to do, because we have a time lag, and we are so late, and did not really do the necessary things in the last 16 years. Although Chancellor Merkel started as a climate chancellor, she only started as a climate chancellor, but she did not end as a climate chancellor. So the first years were very good until 2008, where the financial crisis started, but then she really collapsed as a climate chancellor. On the international arena, she was also very visible and has a good image to Germany, while we are a climate leader and environmental leader, but we are not. We really stopped, or not stopped, but put the brakes on the extension of renewable energy. That was the biggest mistake we did. Instead of, phasing out nuclear is fine. Now we are phasing out coal is fine, but everything is related to renewables, and this is where we are not good enough. We could have reached 80% of renewables now, but we are only at 40, and that's what I would say did Angela Merkel not good, and she was too much probably driven in her coalitions, and the liberals are not easy, I know that. So we know that it will be difficult, of course, but nevertheless, she could have done much more.
So I see that we have the first questions by some students. So
good.
Let's get them involved into the discussion, and I look very much forward to welcome.
Yes, hello.
Hi, can you briefly say your name?
I'm Johannes. Hi.
Hi, Johannes. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. My question is, so since especially greenhouse gas emissions produce a lot of external costs for society and for the communities where they are produced, what would be your approach or your suggestion to internalize these external costs that companies like Exxon or automobile companies that they produce? How do you think they should basically pay for it, for these costs?
Yeah, good question, Johannes. And I think that's the major driver to internalize the external costs to the balance. And usually, as environmental economist, I'm answering as a CO2 price. Yeah? You have to increase the CO2 price. You have to internalize it, but we also have to face that's not only. I would agree. Yes, a CO2 price increase is the most important one, but we are still paying a lot of environmental harmful subsidies. And that's really bad. I mean, it starts with the low taxes, of course, for gasoline and diesel. You can increase the CO2 price here as well. But the diesel, for example, tax is still lower than the gasoline tax. So it's not understandable why this is still the case. And we have several other ones, like on the air system or airlines, and the kerosene is not taxed high enough, and there are so many others. We pay over 50% billion a year on environmental harmful subsidies. And we always at G7 and all the years said we want to reduce that, but it's not happening and not happening enough. We pay still a commuter price that's also harmful subsidies because it benefits high income households and drive also, they are driving to a far distance with this commuter price or commuter subsidy they get. And that's, I mean, there's a long list. So to internalize all this, I would say get the prices right. And get the prices right means they have to reflect the environmental damage. If we are looking at recent numbers, the Umweltbundesamt Environmental Protection Agency says that the price of CO2 is above 190 euro per ton of CO2. And on the climate package, I don't know whether you have followed that, we have now a CO2 price which is 25 euro per ton of CO2 on fossil oil and gas. That's not enough. These are not the external costs. And there are also other studies in showing, well, it's not 190 euros per ton of CO2, it's more 3,000 euros of ton of CO2. If we're looking really at this integrated assessment modeling and include a bottom-up effect. So you're coming up with really other numbers than just this. And this is why it makes so complicated. William Nordhaus is an environmental economist, got several years ago a Nobel Prize. He did a lot of on environmental assessments and integrated assessments, and he always said everything we need is a global CO2 price. That's not wrong, but he's saying this since 35 years, I would say, over 30 years, but we are not having it. And there's a reason for it, because in this moment, we see that already right now, where you increase the price for CO2, gasoline gets more expensive and diesel gets more expensive. Heating becomes more expensive if you heat with fossil fuels. And of course, there's a social injustice because the low-income households cannot afford it as high-income households because they pay less amount of their income to the CO2 price. And this is why it's so important to compensate and lead to a discussion where you compensate low-income households in order to get a social fair system. But this is what makes it so complicated on the political level to get a right CO2 price on a national level, because we have to do it nationally. It's a tax or a price which is coming nationally. So we don't have a global planner who's just saying, well, who's doing what, I decide. So this is why it's a good idea with the CO2 price, and externalities need to be implemented to get the fossil subsidies and environmental harmful subsidies away. And that's the right way to go, but it's really, really difficult. It's difficult to implement it because of privileged people want to stick to their lifestyle, and you have to, I mean, adjust, and that's not what everybody likes.
Thanks a lot for this answer, and thanks a lot, Johannes, for your question. And
thank you.
Please be invited to join us. I get a short note, and then I will get you into the conversation. One thing that you already mentioned, and I think that's in the German discourse, and that also very nicely fits to one other hashtag we have during this conference week, is social justice. And there, my question is, and you already started to explore on this, but can we have this socio-ecological transformation, or how does this socio-ecological transformation look like? Because in the SRU reports, you talk about the ecological transformation, and I think that's super important. But how can we manage to have this really as a socio-ecological transformation?
Yeah, good point, Daniel. Because if we do it right, to make a social ecological transformation, it creates social justice. Why is that? Because low-income households are living at big streets where they cannot move, and their cars increasing the emissions, local emissions, dust, and all this, and the noise, and they're getting sick out of it. That's what we know from the empirics. It's happening. If we reduce the cars or make them environmentally more friendly or increase the public transportation, have buses which are emission free and reduce this harmful particulates and also the emissions, it helps the poor people. One example. The other one is, as I already said, the biggest CO2 footprint have high income households because they own sometimes two houses, they own a large house, they have 2 or 3 cars, and drive and live in the green around the city in the green area where they commute every day, have a big car and emit a lot. So the largest amount of CO2 produces those households. They fly 2 times a year in all over the globe, but also those people who have to fly for business all over the globe, they have really a large CO2 footprint. And if you increase the CO2 price comparison to their income, they are paying less, as low income households who have a low CO2 price, but in comparison to their income, they are paying more. This is why it's so important to look for a social justice solution. We recommended to use the CO2 price revenue you get from having such a price to pay a per capita refund system. We call it Klimaprämie, climate premium. You can call it energy money, whatever you call it.